Louis, thanks very much for joining us and being here in New York. AtkinsRéalis, as many in the audience know, is an important player in civil engineering and in the nuclear business, which we're going to get to. These are hot areas for discussion. But first of all, I want to ask you about your return to the company. This is your second go-around at AtkinsRéalis. You spent some time in the pension world in between. And as you return, you're responsible for, among other things, M&A. So what does the acquisition environment look like right now in the engineering space? And what are the capabilities that the company is looking for?
Well, first of all, thanks, Derek. It's always good to be back in New York. Good to see you. This is week 7, so I'm going to give you in-depth perspectives. It's an interesting time in the engineering space. So as you know, it's a very fragmented industry, which probably will go the way of most industries and gradually consolidate. What we're seeing right now is there is a lot of M&A activity. We also have private equity funds that are coming in and trying to sort of roll up, which is going to be interesting to see, frankly, because typically engineering firms are not that easy to integrate. So if the private equity firms do the real work of actually integrating, then you get, rather than having small-sized firms, you're going to have medium-sized firms that can then be joined into the majors. If they don't, and they just do the a bit of fancy engineering, then what we'll have is companies that look big but are really fragmented and will require a lot of integration. So I think it's an opportune time in the market. Multiples have been going up, which is never helpful when you're a buyer. Helpful if you're a seller, but I tend to be on the buying side, so I take a bit of a break on that. The company itself is in a great position. As you saw, we've paid down debt. We sold the 407 north of Toronto for $2.6 billion to reduce debt on top of that by another $900 million. Our stock price is not bad, as everyone who always comes on stage also is still underpriced, but obviously. But I think we have a currency with which to deploy in acquisitions. I think if you look at the way our company is set up, we have essentially pretty much the full spectrum of capabilities, but we don't always have the full spectrum of capabilities in every jurisdiction. So our M&A strategy is going to be one primarily of being very disciplined, tuck-in acquisitions, and tuck-in, the definition of tuck-in can vary, but essentially trying to close out geographical white space. The David Evans acquisitions was an example of that, where the U.S. Northwest was an area where we had less presence. Post David Evans, we have a better position, and that allows us to leverage the full capabilities of the firm wherever those capabilities may sit, servicing clients in the Northwest.
So it's been a theme already today, is government spending, infrastructure, the kind of some of the big themes driving things this year. Military spending, a lot of this activity is happening in the markets where your company operates. So what can AtkinsRéalis do to get involved? What are the areas where you'll play, for example, in military and infrastructure? What are the areas where you won't play?
So great question. So one thing is, and I think part of the reason why we're hearing a lot about infrastructure, so infrastructure and defense are somewhat related, right? So maybe I'll start by explaining why there's a relation. So people have focused, for example, in Canada, on the message of we're going to actually meet the 2%, then we're going to exceed the 2%, and we're going to go to 5%. But the real way to think about it is we're going to go from 2, or 1.4 to 2, 2 to 3, and then the 3 to 5 is essentially military adjacent things. So it is infrastructure, it is making sure that your power grid is secure. So there are elements there of resilience, there are elements in there of cybersecurity, which count in the 5% as it's defined, right? In terms of pure infrastructure, so Canada has a deficit of about 360 billion Canadian dollars so if you look at what we need to spend just to have the infrastructure in the shape it should be. Put it this way, our highway system was designed in the 50s, 60s, 70s, so all of that is coming due, if you will. So the rule of thumb usually is if something is true in Canada, it's true times 10 in the US. In the US is about 3.7 trillion US dollar deficit. And in the UK is about twice as big as Canada. So you're talking about 725 billion pounds of infrastructure deficits. All of that needs to be built better than it has been, needs to be built with different standards of resilience as well. One of the elements of resilience is the climate patterns are changing. So you do need, a good example is you don't build a storm sewer today the same way you built a storm sewer 20 years ago, because the way the rain comes down is very different, right? So you have to adapt for that. And in that, you also have to adapt when we think about the power infrastructure, for example, we are in a world that is a bit more unruly, where you do get all sorts of aggression, cyber attacks or whatnot, and you do need to protect against that. So for a company like ours, so obviously civil engineering is something we do, but our range of civil engineering is quite broad, right? So we do, well, obviously we'll talk about nuclear, I'm sure, but we do power grids, we do roads, we do bridges, we do cybersecurity. We are giving advice to some governments on their cybersecurity needs, their resilience needs. We are helping with disaster relief in the United States. All of that is sort of playing to strengths that we have, right? On the defense side, obviously you think about, we're going to need submarine pens, we're going to need air bases. But we also work, for example, we help with the maintenance of some Royal Canadian Navy vessels, and we help with the maintenance of some British Royal Navy vessels as well. So if you think about something like the AUKUS deal, there's something where you have British technology helping Australia. That is something we can play a role. So our remit is actually quite broad. Right?
Let's talk about AI for a moment. It's having its impact, early days yet, on all sorts of industries. What sort of impact do you see it having in the engineering business? How do you think AtkinsRéalis might use it?
So I'm gonna break down AI into 5 different buckets. The first bucket is, I would say, we always have to be careful. There's a lot of hype out there, right? So you have a lot of people who are some of our peers, but companies in every industry that are talking about their AI noose. And sometimes what you realize when you dig down is that means they're using Microsoft Copilot in the office, right? So that's not quite impressive yet. So remove the hype for a second. On the corporate side of things, I think there is vast potential for AI to help us be more efficient on, I'm going to say, the HR side, the finance side. So a lot of back office functions. Frankly, the wind work side as well. So it allows us to, to me, AI is, like, the key point is, how do you industrialize? How do you automate? And what part does AI play into that? So AI is sort of the end of that chain, not the beginning of that chain. So there's always room to industrialize further your back office functions, I'm going to say, and create efficiencies that way. We at AtkinsRéalis have gone through, in my past incarnation, we went through quite a bit of a transformation program and took out quite a lot of costs, right? So that is never ending. You always have to look at your costs every day is a new day. But I'll give you a good example of a tool that we use where you can come into a building site and with your phone sort of scan with your camera, and then we have an AI tool that will identify safety deficiencies. Does that replace the operators on the ground doing the right thing? No, but does it help them? Yes, it does, right? So I think that's a good, useful way to think about AI. When you turn it into on the engineering side, one of the big concerns is always on the engineering side, and we all drive on roads, on bridges, we all live in buildings, and some of us may live close to nuclear reactors, so you'll be thankful for this. In engineering, quality control is very important. You do need to have an engineer that can trace it all the way back. So to say, well, congratulations, Derek, your new bridge has been entirely designed by AI following an algorithm that we're not sure about, but it's going to be fine. That obviously wouldn't work, right? So if you think about how AI probably develops in in engineering. It's probably more a blue team, red team issue of you have your team of engineers building and designing the way we're used to. Again, there's automation and there are tools that accelerate the work. What you can have is a red team that's the AI that's saying, okay, how would you design the bridge? And then that allows you to compare and contrast and make sure that you haven't missed anything, or make sure that sometimes the AI may come up with something, an interesting twist. And you can then reverse engineer that twist. But what you can't have is to say, there's an algorithm, I don't know how it was trained, but it sort of designed it this way. So that's gonna, I suspect that's gonna mean that adoption has to be very controlled. And within AtkinsRéalis, we do have some pilots to make sure that we are controlling how it's going. The last 2 points I'll say is on the service side. Again, we are advising, for example, the UK government on their AI approach within some ministries of the UK government. So obviously, as there are more things AI, our services are being requested. And the last bit, of course, is on the nuclear side. We think that, right now in the US, there's 11 gigawatts that is being used just to power data centers, and that's expected to be 42 gigawatts in 2030. So Ada was mentioning a bit earlier, obviously, whatever you do with data centers. So a query using artificial intelligence uses 10 times more electricity generally than your normal Google search. So all of that also for us, there's also a bit in there, which is, well, you need power to power these things. And thankfully, that's something we know a bit about.
Yeah, well, it's important that we talk about nuclear because that is a differentiation point for AtkinsRéalis. You actually own the technology. How far can you go with it? How much potential does that business have? Well, yeah, what can you do with it?
It's exciting times, very exciting times. So our backlog on nuclear is up by 223% year over year, which is in any given year, that's a good number. If you think about the way we were thinking about nuclear, but a few years ago, we were thinking about there was a lot of decommissioning work. So right now, decommissioning is still one thing we do. We're decommissioning Sellafield in the UK. The thing that has come back is extension. So we're extending the life cycle of Darlington, Pickering, and Bruce Power in Ontario. So Ada mentioned a few of those. Qinshan in China, Cernovoda in Romania. So those are extensions. So again, back to, if you think about a few years ago when Angela Merkel then announced Energiewende in Germany and saying we're going to go move away from nuclear, well, to some extent, I would say we now have an Energiewende 2.0, which is we're shifting back to let's bring back the nuclears. So extension of existing plants. We have a new CANDO in Cernovoda as well. That's on the go. We have other builds using different technologies, Sizewell C, Inclay Point C in the UK. So there's going to be a lot of new builds using various technologies. And again, we do own the CANDO technology, but we also work with other technologies as well. One challenge that we're going to face as an industry is, if you think about it this way, in the 40 years of the first nuclear phase, 112 reactors were built in the United States by 4 OEMs. The plan right now is calling for 300 by 2050. So there's going to be a lot of demand there. So I've covered decommissionings, I've covered life extensions, I've covered new CANDOs, I've covered new reactors that are not CANDOs. We're also developing Monarch, which is sort of the next iteration of the CANDO technology. On top of that, we are involved in several SMRs, small modular reactors. And we are also supporting some clients on their work on fusion reactors. So I don't think fusion is for tomorrow, but there is already engineering work that is being done and that we are helping ITER in France and Princeton in the US with. So I think it's a broad spectrum because we will need all of that to actually get to the solution.
All right, we're going to bring you back in 2050 to see how we did on building 300 new reactors.
Yeah, indeed.
We've reached time, so thank you very much for joining us today.